The year was 1879, and the Colorado sun beat down mercilessly on the small, dusty town of Havenwood. For Alara, the heat felt like a physical weight, pressing down on the shame already heavy in her heart. She stood before the town elders, their faces hard as granite, their eyes colder than the mountain snows. Her crime, her womb was empty. For years she had tried, prayed, and hoped, but no child had come. In Havenwood, a woman's worth was measured by the babies she bore, and Alara had failed. "You are barren," the elder's voice boomed, echoing through the hushed square. "A withered vine, you bring no fruit to this community." Alara flinched, her hands clenching at her sides. She wanted to argue, to scream that her heart was full, even if her arms were not. But her voice caught in her throat, choked by tears that dared not fall. A hush fell over the crowd of townsfolk, a mixture of pity and cruel judgment in their gazes. She saw former friends turn away, their faces etched with fear of contagion, as if barrenness were a sickness that could spread. Then came the pain, a searing agony that ripped through her arm. A rough hand pressed a hot iron against her skin, leaving a mark that would never fade. It was a brand, a cruel letter B for Barren, burned into her flesh for all to see. A gasp escaped her lips, quickly stifled. The scent of burnt flesh filled the air, a sickening perfume of her disgrace. "You are cast out," the elder declared, his voice firm and final. "Leave Havenwood, do not return." Her world, once familiar, crumbled into dust around her. With nothing but the clothes on her back and the fresh, burning shame on her arm, Alara was pushed from the town gates. She stumbled forward, the sun glaring down on her branded arm, a public declaration of her inadequacy. The path ahead was unknown, stretching out into the vast, unforgiving Colorado landscape. Behind her, Havenwood shrank, its houses growing smaller, its people fading into the distance. She was alone, an outcast, branded and exiled, carrying a wound that went deeper than her skin. The hot Colorado wind whipped at Alara's skirts as she walked, each step carrying her further from the only home she had ever known. The sun was a relentless eye in the sky, baking the earth to a hard, cracked surface. Days blurred into a weary rhythm of walking, resting under the sparse shade of a juniper tree and moving on again. Her water skin grew lighter, her stomach emptier, but the weight of the brand on her arm and the deeper wound in her soul remained. She kept her left arm covered, even in the stifling heat, using a torn piece of cloth to hide the cruel letter that screamed her failure to the world. She met no one on the desolate trails, only the occasional lizard darting across her path or the distant cry of a hawk. Each night, as the stars blazed in the vast, dark sky, Alara huddled close to a small fire, the silence amplifying her loneliness. Thoughts of Havenwood, of the harsh faces and whispered words, haunted her sleep. She was a ghost wandering through a land that seemed as empty as she felt inside. Weeks passed in this solitary journey. Her shoes wore thin, her clothes grew dusty and torn. Her hope, a tiny flicker at first, began to dwindle with each sunrise. Just when she thought her legs could carry her no further, when the endless horizon seemed to mock her weary spirit, a faint plume of smoke appeared in the distance. Then the glint of a tin roof, and finally the faint outlines of buildings. It was a small settlement, even smaller than Havenwood, nestled in a valley carved by a winding creek. Dust motes danced in the air, kicked up by unseen footsteps. A few horses were tethered outside a general store, their tails swishing lazily. This new place, called Redemption Gulch, wasn't grand, but it was a sign of life. A place where perhaps, just perhaps, no one knew her story or the terrible mark she carried. With a heavy sigh that was half exhaustion and half a fragile hope, Alara walked towards the dusty main street, ready to face whatever new challenges this unknown town might hold. She kept her branded arm carefully hidden, a secret she prayed would remain hers alone. Alara walked slowly into Redemption Gulch, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar faces. Most people simply glanced at her, then looked away, used to new arrivals in a town where folks often came and went. She found a quiet spot near the livery stable, watching the bustle of the small community, trying to gather her courage. Her stomach growled, a hollow ache that reminded her of her urgent need for food and shelter. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm her again, a man emerged from the general store. He was tall, with kind eyes that seemed to hold a hint of sadness. 4 children, ranging from a toddler clutching his leg to a boy no older than 10, swirled around him like busy bees. He looked tired, his clothes dusty, but there was a gentle patience in his movements as he helped a little girl adjust her bonnet. His gaze fell upon Alara, lingering for a moment. He didn't look at her with judgment or even with the usual quick dismissal. Instead, his eyes held a flicker of understanding, as if he recognized a shared burden. He walked over, his children trailing behind him, their curious eyes wide. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said, his voice soft but clear. "You look like you've been on the road a while." Alara nodded, her throat too dry to speak. She pulled her tattered sleeve further down her arm, instinctively hiding the brand. "My name's Thomas," he continued, gesturing to his lively brood, "and these are my little ones, Josiah, Samuel, Martha, and little Lily." The children mumbled shy greetings, peeking out from behind their father's legs. "I lost my wife last winter. It's been a struggle, keeping the house and the children looked after while still working my claim." He paused, looking at Alara with an open honesty. "I don't have much, but I have a small cabin and food on the table. If you're in need of work and a roof over your head, I could use some help with the children and the house. It's a busy place." Alara stared at him, stunned. No one had offered her kindness since her exile. Here was a man who saw not her barrenness but her need. He saw not a mark of shame, but simply a woman struggling. The offer was simple, honest, and utterly unexpected. A tiny spark of hope, long dormant, flickered to life within her. Alara accepted Thomas's offer with a silent nod, her voice still unwilling to trust itself. She followed him and his lively children to a small but sturdy cabin on the edge of town. Inside, it was a whirlwind of activity, toys scattered, a half-made bed, and the comforting smell of wood smoke and a lingering hint of sourdough bread. It was messy, but it was lived in, a stark contrast to the sterile quiet of her own empty heart. From that first evening, Alara plunged into the work. She cleaned, cooked, mended clothes, and most importantly, cared for the children. Josiah, the eldest, was a quiet boy who helped his father. Samuel was a mischievous redhead, always finding trouble. Martha, a bright-eyed girl, loved to draw with charcoal, and Lily, the youngest, a sweet-faced toddler, rarely left her father's side. Alara poured herself into their needs. When Lily cried for a story, Alara found old tales she hadn't thought of in years. When Samuel scraped his knee, her hands were steady as she cleaned the wound. She braided Martha's hair each morning, listening patiently to her dreams. And she made sure Josiah always had a warm meal after helping his father in the fields. She moved through the cabin with a quiet efficiency, her sleeves always pulled down, even when it was warm, keeping her branded arm hidden. The shame of it was a constant companion, a burning ember under her skin, reminding her of her past. She often caught herself watching the children, a pang of longing in her chest, quickly followed by the familiar ache of worthlessness. These were not her children, and she could never have her own. She reminded herself of this every day, building a wall around her heart to protect it from further pain. Yet in their simple demands, their innocent questions, and their unguarded laughter, Alara found a strange comfort. Their needs were so clear, so real. There was no time for brooding, no space for self-pity when a hungry child needed feeding or a scraped knee needed mending. In caring for them, a small part of her felt useful, needed, even if it wasn't in the way she had once dreamed. She was not a mother, she told herself, but she was a help, and for now, that was enough. The cabin, once filled with the muted sorrow of a mother's absence, slowly began to hum with a different kind of warmth. Alara's quiet presence brought order and calm. Her hands, though accustomed to hard work, were gentle when she tucked Lily into her small bed or helped Martha untangle a knot in her yarn. Her voice, soft and soothing, would read stories by the dim lamplight, painting pictures with words for the eager young faces. The children, who had missed a mother's touch and guidance deeply, were quick to respond to Alara. Josiah, initially reserved, started to seek her advice on small matters, like how to best mend a fence or where to find the ripest berries. Samuel, with his boundless energy, would sometimes pause his mischief to show Alara a curious rock he'd found or a particularly fast rabbit he'd chased. Martha, the most observant of the children, would watch Alara with big, thoughtful eyes. She noticed the way Alara always made sure her dress covered her left forearm, even when she rolled dough or stoked the fire. But Martha never asked. Instead, she brought Alara wildflowers, small, colorful gifts that spoke of a growing affection. Little Lily, who barely remembered her own mother, was the most open. She would follow Alara like a shadow, her tiny hand often reaching for Alara's skirt. When Alara sang quiet lullabies while rocking her, Lily would nestle close, her breath soft against Alara's chest. The simple acts of care, the consistent kindness, began to weave Alara into the very fabric of their lives. They didn't see a barren woman. They saw the one who fixed their torn shirts, told them bedtime stories, and made the best cornbread. They saw the woman who listened to their fears and celebrated their small victories. Without even realizing it, Alara was mending more than just clothes. She was mending little hearts, filling the empty spaces left by loss with her quiet, steady love. Each day, the children's affection grew, a testament to the power of a gentle spirit and helping hands. One crisp autumn afternoon, Alara sat on the small porch, mending one of Samuel's torn shirts. The scent of pine needles and wood smoke hung in the air, a peaceful contrast to the turmoil that often stirred within her. Lily, the youngest, usually a whirlwind of energy, was unusually quiet. She had been playing in the dust with a handful of pebbles, but now she toddled over, her little face smudged with dirt, and leaned against Alara's leg. Alara paused her sewing, gently stroking Lily's soft hair. "What's wrong, little one?" she asked, her voice hushed. Lily looked up, her big, innocent eyes wide and a little tearful. She pointed to a small splinter in her finger, a tiny red speck. "Hurts," she whispered, her lip trembling. Alara carefully took Lily's hand, her own fingers calloused from work but gentle as she examined the splinter. "Oh dear, let's get that out." She fetched a needle and a bit of clean cloth, her brow furrowed in concentration. As she worked, slowly and carefully extracting the tiny piece of wood, Lily whimpered softly. "It's almost out, brave girl," Alara murmured, her face close to Lily's. "Just a little more." With a final, delicate pull, the splinter was out. Alara dabbed the tiny wound with a damp cloth and then kissed Lily's finger. "There, all better now." Lily looked at her finger, then up at Alara, her eyes clearing. A wide, wobbly smile spread across her face. And then so soft it was barely a whisper, a sound that Alara had yearned for, dreamt of, and then buried deep in her heart escaped Lily's lips. "Mama," Lily said, leaning her head against Alara's arm, not the branded one but the other, warm and comforting. Alara froze, the needle slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the wooden porch. The sound of that one word, so simple, so profound, struck her like a bolt of lightning. It was a word she had been told she would never hear, a title she could never claim. Her heart, long frozen by shame and despair, felt a sudden, sharp thaw. A warmth spread through her chest, startling and overwhelming. Tears, unexpected and unstoppable, welled in her eyes, blurring the sun-drenched landscape. It wasn't pity or duty or even simple kindness that filled her now. It was something far more precious, a fragile bud of love pushing through barren ground. The echo of "Mama" from Lily's lips lingered in the air, a sweet melody Alara had never dared to dream of hearing. That evening, at supper, the other children noticed Lily's new word. Samuel, ever the bold one, looked from Lily to Alara, a flicker of understanding in his bright eyes. "If Lily calls you Mama, can we too?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. Alara's breath caught. She glanced at Thomas, who was watching her with a gentle, unreadable expression. Her heart pounded in her chest, a drumbeat of both fear and burgeoning joy. Could she truly accept such a sacred title? A barren woman, a branded outcast, called Mama. Before she could form a reply, Martha, usually so reserved, spoke up. "Please, Alara, you're like a mama to us." Her eyes, full of earnest longing, met Alara. Josiah, the eldest, nodded slowly. "It feels right," he murmured, his gaze steady and warm. The dam around Alara's heart, which had begun to crack with Lily's whisper, now broke open. The warmth that had started as a flicker now surged through her, chasing away the cold shadows of her past. She looked at their eager faces, so full of innocent affection, and realized that they didn't see the brand, didn't know the cruel word tied to her name. They saw only the woman who cared for them, who loved them. A genuine smile, one that reached her eyes and banished the sadness that had resided there for so long, bloomed on Alara's face. "Yes," she said, her voice a little shaky but clear. "Yes, you can." The children erupted in happy shouts, a joyous chorus of "Mama! Our Mama!" They rushed to her, burying her in a tangle of hugs and small, loving arms. Alara wrapped her arms around them, holding them close, feeling the incredible weight and wonder of their acceptance. It was a warmth she truly thought she'd never know, a love chosen and freely given. In that messy, lively cabin, surrounded by these children who saw past her perceived failings, Alara felt more whole, more alive than she ever had before. The title of Mama felt like a healing balm, slowly erasing the pain of the brand not from her skin, but from her soul. Thomas had watched the transformation in his home with quiet awe. He saw the children, once shadowed by grief, blossom under Alara's gentle hand. He saw the toys put away, the meals cooked with care, the mended clothes, but more than that, he saw the laughter that now filled the cabin, the bedtime stories that chased away nightmares, the secure comfort in his children's eyes. He had been present that evening when the children, one by one, had asked to call Alara Mama. He had seen the raw emotion on Alara's face, the tears that streamed down her cheeks, and the pure, unburdened joy when she finally said yes. In that moment, he realized something profound. He had hired Alara out of need, for help with his busy household and his motherless children. He had seen a struggling woman and offered kindness, but now he saw so much more. He watched her one afternoon as she helped Martha learn to embroider, her head bent close to the girls, her voice patient and encouraging. He saw how Lily clung to her skirt, how Samuel brought her his latest treasure, how Josiah sought her out for quiet talks. Alara had not given him children, but she had given his children something just as vital, a mother's love, a comforting presence, a steady hand. She had brought warmth and laughter back into their lives, mending the broken pieces of their little family. Thomas realized he no longer saw her as a hired hand or even just a kind woman. He saw the strength in her quiet ways, the depth of her compassion, and the profound love she showered on his children. He saw the way her eyes lit up when Lily giggled, the gentle smile she offered when Samuel told a silly joke. He saw a woman who was a precious gift, not for what she might or might not be able to give in the future, but for the immeasurable good she brought to their lives right now. His heart, too, had been a lonely place since his wife passed, and Alara's presence had filled it with a quiet hope he hadn't known was missing. He began to see her not as a barren woman, but as the heart of his home, a true blessing. The word Mama had unlocked something deep within Alara. With each passing day, as the children showered her with their innocent affection, the heavy cloak of shame began to lift. Yet the brand remained, a secret scar that still whispered doubts in the quiet hours. She often caught Thomas watching her, his gaze thoughtful and kind, and she wondered if he, too, would turn away if he knew her full story. One evening, after the children were tucked into bed and the cabin was quiet, Alara found Thomas sitting by the hearth, whittling a small wooden bird for Lily. The firelight danced on his face, highlighting the lines of worry and kindness etched there. A sudden courage, born of the love she now felt, swelled in her chest. She sat opposite him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Thomas," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "there's something you should know." He stopped whittling, his eyes meeting hers, full of patient expectation. "You can tell me anything, Alara." Taking a deep breath, Alara pushed up the sleeve of her dress, revealing the crude, ugly bee burned into her forearm. The scar was red and angry against her pale skin, a testament to the cruelty she had faced. Her heart pounded, expecting revulsion, judgment, perhaps even fear. She waited for him to recoil, to see her as the withered vine her old town had called her. Instead, Thomas reached out, his calloused fingers gently tracing the edges of the brand. There was no disgust in his eyes, only a profound sadness and understanding. "What happened?" he asked, his voice soft, full of empathy. Ilara, emboldened by his unexpected gentleness, poured out her story. She told him of Havenwood, of the elder's harsh decree, of the shame and the exile, of her years of silent suffering. She spoke of her deep longing for children and the crushing weight of being called barren. When she finished, a heavy silence filled the cabin. Thomas looked at her, then at the brand, then back at her eyes. He reached out and took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "Ilara," he said, his voice husky, "that mark means nothing here. It tells me only of your pain and the cruelty of others. It does not define you. You are kind, strong, and you have filled my children's lives with more love than I could have ever hoped for." In his eyes, Ilara saw not judgment but acceptance, not condemnation but compassion. The shame, once a burning ember, finally began to cool, replaced by a profound sense of relief and belonging. The full confession had lifted a monumental weight from Ilara's shoulders. With Thomas's unwavering acceptance, the old shame began to truly fade. Days turned into weeks, and the ease between them grew, a comfortable silence often shared, punctuated by the joyful chaos of the children. They worked side by side, tending the small garden, mending the cabin, their hands brushing sometimes, sending a jolt of warmth through Ilara. One evening, after the last rays of sunlight had dipped behind the western peaks, casting long shadows across the valley, Thomas asked Ilara to join him on the porch. The air was cool and sweet, filled with the chirping of crickets. He turned to her, his kind eyes searching hers in the fading light. "Ilara," he began, his voice soft, "you know my children call you Mama. And you know how much that means to them and to me." Ilara nodded, her heart fluttering. "It means everything, Thomas. When I first brought you here," he continued, "I was just looking for help. For someone to keep my home running, to care for my little ones. But you've done so much more than that. You've brought laughter back into these walls, peace to my heart, and a love to my children that I thought they'd lost forever." He took her hands, his touch warm and firm. "You've filled this home with a light I didn't know could exist again." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "Ilara, I know what happened to you. I know the pain you've carried. And I know you believe you can't have children." He squeezed her hands gently. "But that doesn't matter to me. What matters is the woman you are, the kindness you've shown, the love you've given. You are already a mother to my children, and a partner to me in every way that counts." Then he took a deeper breath, his gaze unwavering. "Ilara, will you be my wife? Will you stay and make this home, our home, truly complete?" Ilara's eyes welled with tears, but these were tears of pure joy, unburdened by sorrow or shame. This was not an offer born of desperation or a need for an heir, but of true affection and deep respect. Thomas saw her asterisk, the whole of her, and loved what he saw. Her heart, once so guarded, swelled with an overwhelming sense of belonging and love. Ilara's heart, once a barren landscape of sorrow, now bloomed with a vibrant, unexpected joy. She looked at Thomas, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the rising moon, and saw a future filled not with the judgment of the past, but with the boundless love of a chosen family. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "yes, Thomas, I will be your wife." He smiled, a slow, gentle smile that reached his eyes, and pulled her into a tender embrace. It was a promise not just between two adults, but a silent vow to the four young souls sleeping peacefully inside the cabin. The news was met with delighted shouts from the children the next morning. Lily clapped her hands, Martha drew a picture of Ilara and Thomas holding hands, and Samuel and Josiah, though older, grinned widely, clearly relieved and happy. Their joy cemented Ilara's decision. This was her family now, forged not by blood or expectation, but by shared hardship, kindness, and deep, true affection. From that day forward, something shifted within Ilara. The bee on her arm, once a searing mark of shame, began to transform in her mind. It was no longer a sign of her failure, but a testament to her journey. It was a reminder of the cruel past she had endured and the strength it had taken to survive. It was a symbol of the path that had led her, broken and despairing, to this cabin, to these children, to this loving man. She no longer hid her arm with such fierce determination. Sometimes, when she was busy in the garden or stirring a pot over the fire, her sleeve would slip, revealing the faint, faded mark. If a curious child or a passing neighbor noticed, Alara would meet their gaze with a newfound, quiet confidence. The brand was a part of her story, yes, but it no longer defined her. It had become a scar of survival, a badge of resilience, and a silent declaration that even from the ashes of rejection, a beautiful, chosen life could rise. She was a Lara, a wife, a mama, and undeniably strong. The wedding was a simple affair in Redemption Gulch, held under the wide Colorado sky. The whole town gathered, their faces kind and welcoming. Alara, dressed in a modest but beautiful gown Thomas had helped her choose, stood beside him, her heart full. The children, dressed in their Sunday best, beamed up at them, Lily clutching Alara's hand tightly. When Thomas and Alara exchanged their vows, their promises were not just to each other, but to the family they had already built, brick by loving brick, in the messy, joyful cabin. Life in the cabin continued, but with a deeper sense of peace and belonging. Alara was no longer just a helper. She was mama, wife, and the steady heart of their home. The children thrived, their laughter echoing through the valley. Josiah grew into a strong, dependable young man, helping Thomas with the farm. Samuel, still mischievous, found an outlet for his energy in exploring the surrounding hills, always bringing home new stories. Martha's drawings became more detailed, capturing the warmth of their family life. And Lily, always Alara's shadow, bloomed into a sweet, gentle girl, never forgetting the woman who had mended her splinter and her heart. Alara's past, the brand and the exile, became a distant memory, a story told only in hushed tones to Thomas on rare, quiet evenings. The scar remained, a faint, silvery line on her arm, but it held no power over her anymore. It was simply a part of her journey, a reminder of the strength she had found in the most unexpected place. Their life wasn't without its hardships. The Colorado frontier in 1879 saw to that. There were lean winters, long days of hard work, and the occasional worry that life in a small mining town brought. But they faced it all together, a united front of love and resilience. Thomas and Alara, with their 4 children, proved that family wasn't just about blood, but about the bonds forged in shared kindness, acceptance, and unwavering love. They were a testament to the idea that even when one path closes with harsh judgment, another can open, leading to a happiness more profound and real than any person could ever dream. Love, they showed everyone, truly could bloom in the most unexpected of places, transforming barrenness into an abundance of joy.